All right, well, we have time for one more question here on the show. At least one more. Let's see how this goes. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from John in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I know you've talked about ring sizes before, but I swear, the Crockett rings in 1987 looked smaller than they did in 1986. Something changed. I'm picturing the 87 Crockett Cup, and that ring was small, and it wasn't just Baltimore. Now, the mat was darker than the light blue mats Crockett used in 86, so there's a chance this is influencing how I see the ring. By the way, I wish they hadn't changed the combination light blue matte yellow NWA lettering. Anyway, those rings by 87 were too small in my opinion. The guys had so little room to maneuver, it was claustrophobic to watch, and it made things look a bit Mickey Mouse. Does this ring a bell? Or am I fucking seeing things? Signed, Tim Horner's a douche, John in Westchester, Pennsylvania.
John in Westchester, you're seeing things. Regardless of what you think about the side, there was no difference in 86 and 87. Now, we've talked about this before. If you were at a spot show at a high school gym in those days, then sometimes you may see a 16-foot ring. For a small show in a small building, if somebody's being asked to, instead of bringing one of the regular promotion rings, there's somebody close, has a trailer and a ring, blah, 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 it's spot show, whatever. But no, all of Crockett Promotions rings and the ones that they booked when they went outside the normal territory were all 18-foot rings. Almost every ring in the wrestling business in the 70s and 80s, except for, like I say, little spot shows or little rinky-dink outlaw promotions in some small town, all of them were 18 feet, except for Vern Gagne's AWA and Vince Sr. and then Jr.'s WWF that used 20-foot rings. And that's a holdover from when Vern started in the late 40s in the business. Most of the rings were 20 feet because they were boxing rings. Some of them were bigger. And the Cobo Arena till the 70s in Detroit had what appeared to be at least a 24-foot ring. It was insane. And Vern, from Chicago and from all the big towns that he worked, he kept that tradition, 20-foot ring. And in a big building, it works because, you've got more room to move around in the ring, and it's bigger for people in the upper reaches of the general admission seats to see. However, having said that, Crockett and everybody else in the wrestling, and also in California, I think at least Los Angeles, the Olympic probably had a 20-foot ring. I bet you Shire used an 18-footer, just by thought. But most of the rest of the business used 18-footers because, again, newer times came up. You wanted an 18-foot ring. All the Southern promotions had 18-foot rings because they're easier to make the suspension ring that has the better give and the more bounce so you're not fracturing yourself. Also, a lot of times those promotions didn't have trucks. They just had trailers. Believe it, in an 18-foot ring, unless it's one of those goddamn spot show rings that are hard as a fucking rock and come into pieces, you've got 18-foot beams that are not collapsible. So you try getting a 20-foot beam on a goddamn trailer, it's more difficult for the transportation. So everybody used an 18-foot ring, and WCW adopted that from Crockett. And there was no difference in the size of Crockett's rings from 83, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or the WCW ring, 18 feet. And I like those better because the action is faster. As we mentioned, not only the 20-footers, Vince and Vern did this, used real ropes instead of cables, which slows you down when you're hitting the ropes. But they're harder to jump off of, etc. But an 18-foot ring, the action is faster. When you shoot a guy off of a headlock, he takes 3 steps, he's at the ropes. By the time you've got a chance to shake your head, he's coming back at you. You look up, you see him, it's too late. He hits you with the tackle. In a 20-foot ring, shit just takes a while to fucking transpire. It was built for the big guys, the Andres, the Hogans, etc. But so I like the 18-footers because they're easier to build with give, they're easier to transport, and the action inside them is faster. The 20-footers, especially with real ropes, are like a muddy horse track. And the only time you'll get a 16-footer is a small spot show where the building is a problem. I mean, there was one time a Ring of Honor show. When we made Ring of Honor's ring, Danny Davis had them custom made. We made them 19 feet to split the difference because so many of the guys were doing stuff on the apron and needed a little extra room. And also, it gave the look of almost a WWE ring, because that's what we ended up starting to use in OVW to try to make sure that the guys didn't have that culture shock when they moved from an 18-foot ring to a 20-foot ring. It'll really throw you off. So we made 19-footers. So it's a little closer, but still we could get it in the building. Because we made that ring for Ring of Honor, and they ran the building in Milwaukee. And we didn't know ahead of time, because Gary Juster is too lazy to go and look at it, that you couldn't, there was no freight elevator to the third floor where the room was. We were going to have the matches. You had to bring the goddamn ring up the stairs. And if the beams had been 6 inches longer, they wouldn't have fit around the curve of the fucking stairs. We couldn't have got them on the third floor. So all these things come into play. It ain't that easy. Just, let's have a 20-footer. Well, where are you putting it? What are you going to do with it?
How much of the 1980s WWF style that so many people look down upon, and so many of us have in the past,
was because of the rock hard ring?
How much of it was the bodies, the rock hard bodies, everyone getting bigger, the schedule, and how much of it do you think were the rings? Or was the rings, I should say?
All of those things in pretty equal installments. The guys were gaining weight because they were on the sauce, so they couldn't move like they used to. They were being run ragged on the road. So every day they were gone for 3 weeks at a time. So every day became a goddamn ordeal to get through. The rocks were like the fucking desk I'm leaning, or the rings were like a rock, like the desk I'm leaning on now. So guys modified or didn't take bumps because what the fuck? You're working every night for weeks and on a frying pan. And again, except for the guys like, the Bulldogs who came in from Calgary, with the habit of having to fucking get in there and really put out a match, or the guys who came from down south or mid-south or whatever, they quickly learned that Vince didn't put a premium on the quality of the match as much as, are there people in the building, and sell them the sizzle and get the fucking gimmicks over. So it was all those things for body self-preservation. Then why am I, Mark, going out and doing all this shit when nobody else is working that hard? And that's what, from two different viewpoints, Flair used to make fun of Hogan because by the time that Flair was just breaking a sweat in a title match in his ring, Hogan had already done his 8 minutes, dropped the leg, took a shower, and was back at the hotel. And Hogan used to make fun of Flair because when Flair was just starting to break a sweat in his match in his ring, Hogan had already done his 8 minutes, dropped the leg, taken a shower, and was back at the hotel. They were both laughing at each other for the same reason.